Achilles and Agamemnon reconcile. Sort of. And then Briseis is returned to Achilles at last. Hello and welcome, or welcome back. Today we are reading the great books of Western civilization, beginning with the Iliad. This is book 19 from the Robert Fagles translation, and as always, I will start with a brief plot summary and then move into analysis and commentary. Thetis arrives at Achilles' tent, bearing the shining golden gifts from the god of fire. She lays these divine armaments at his feet, and the glare of the light off of them is such that no soldier can bear to look at them, except for Achilles. The more he stares, the greater his anger grows. After asking that his mother protect Patroclus' body from bugs and rot, Achilles goes out into the camp and meets up with Diomedes, Odysseus, Agamemnon, and all the rest of the soldiers. With all the soldiers assembled, Achilles speaks to Agamemnon. He reflects on the pointlessness of their feud and begs Agamemnon to now that he is back and his anger is ended, arm the soldiers for battle, prepare to go against Hector immediately. Agamemnon responds with a great, long, and grandiose speech, more for the soldiers than Achilles, insisting that what happened and the feud was not his fault, that he was blinded, that he was made mad or crazy by the gods. They are the ones who are responsible for the destruction that was brought upon the army because he spurned Achilles, not him. Agamemnon also makes a great show of offering to Achilles all of the same fortunes and slaves and gifts that he had promised him for coming back to the fighting back in Book 9. Achilles interrupts his speech, saying that he doesn't care at all about the gifts, only that everyone gets ready for battle immediately. Now Odysseus responds, reminding Achilles that it's early in the morning. None of the troops have eaten yet, and they have to do so before fighting. So, since there's no rush, he might as well take his time, let Agamemnon give him the gifts, make his oath that he never touched Briseis, and give all of those things to him. With this done, they can sacrifice to Zeus, eat their meal, and then go fight. It's the most reasonable course of action. Agamemnon agrees with this wholeheartedly. Achilles refuses, proposing that they instead fast, not eat a thing, and go into battle on empty stomachs, only eating once he's gotten his revenge. He, at least, swears that he will not eat until he carries this out. Odysseus tries to dissuade him and orders all of the soldiers to eat their meal. Agamemnon then swears his oath to Achilles that he never touched Briseis, and then returns her, along with all the other slaves, gold, and treasures that he had promised him. Achilles then presides with Agamemnon at a sacrifice for Zeus, and then allows his men to go and eat if they want to. Meanwhile, he returns with Briseis to his tent, and does not eat. Briseis weeps over Patroclus' body. She reveals that he had been kind to her when she was first captured, and had promised that he would get her her freedom by making her Achilles' wife instead of a slave, and that dream was lost forever with his death. The other captains and kings arrive at Achilles' tent and try to convince him to eat, but he refuses, insisting that he will not be comforted by anything except battle. Now Achilles mourns over Patroclus. He speaks aloud and reveals that he has a son who is far away from Phthia on Skyros. Achilles was hoping that he would be able to send Patroclus after this son, to bring him home to his father Peleus, so that he might be comforted after Achilles' death. This, however, is no longer possible. Zeus pities Achilles and commands Athena to go and fill his stomach with ambrosia and nectar without his knowledge, to keep his strength up while allowing him to maintain his fast. Finally, once the army has eaten, they all arm for battle and prepare to march, with Achilles at their head, wearing the burnished, flaming armor of the gods. Agamemnon explains his actions to his men after Achilles ends his anger. It may look like he's apologizing at first, but he isn't. He is instead claiming that he was blinded by the gods, that he was made mad, frenzied by the gods. He's not claiming responsibility at all. He's willing to make amends by offering gifts, the same ones that he offered without an apology before, but he insists that he's only doing so because it's not his fault. He is backing down from his position somewhat. After all, he is giving Briseis back, but he doesn't actually think that he's wrong, no matter what he says. Notice that when he stands to speak, he doesn't move at all from where he is. He doesn't go out to meet Achilles or shake his hand or whatever they did instead of that back then. He is quite literally unmoved. We might say stiff-necked. This speech is an excuse given to the soldiers to justify his actions. After all, the soldiers would be right to blame him for everything that's happened since Book 1. In fairness to Agamemnon, Zeus has tried to influence his will before, most notably in Book 2 of the epic. However, we were not told of any meddling by Zeus prior to that moment. So I'm inclined to think that all of Agamemnon's bad decisions and stubbornness were his own. Achilles, on the other hand, appears to have more sincere regret, if only marginally so. Note what he says about his actions. Enough. Let bygones be bygones. Now, by God, I call a halt to all my anger. It's wrong to keep on raging, heart inflamed forever. He acknowledges his wrongdoing. But as I said, he's not entirely honest. Look at the passage where he sacrifices the boar with Agamemnon. Father Zeus, great are the blinding frenzies you deal out to men. If not, I swear Atrides could never have roused the fury in me, the rage that would not die, or wrenched the girl away against my will. Stubborn, implacable man. You could read that in two different tones. Either he does believe that Agamemnon was blinded, and he's acknowledging that, or, I think, more likely, he doesn't believe Agamemnon was blinded, and he's subtly calling him out for it. I personally find hilarious. Yeah, that was some blinding. It's the back end of his prayer that has his dishonesty, though. But Zeus, somehow, was bent on this awesome slaughter of Achaeans. Yeah, for some reason, Zeus just wanted to punish the Greeks for something or other. How could that have happened? Did somebody pray for that? Achilles chooses not to mention the favor that his mother did for him, and seems to attribute the Achaean losses to random chance or the will of Zeus. And in that way, his apology is just like Agamemnon's. Neither of them actually regrets what they did. Just the results. These results have inspired true contrition in Achilles to an extent. He blames himself. Is he right to? He was the one who begged for the slaughter of the Greeks and for more glory for himself. And then he was also the one who chose to send Patroclus into battle. I say yes. For the deaths of the Greeks? Yeah, obviously. For Patroclus' death? Arguably, yes. Hear me out. Look back at when Achilles was warning Patroclus not to chase the Trojans too far. He mentions his concern for his friend's safety, but only really as an afterthought. The primary reason he gives is the preservation of his own glory. Take this command to heart. You must not burn for war against these Trojans. Not without me. You will only make my glory that much less. Achilles already put Zeus in charge of obtaining glory for him, though. And he let him decide how he was going to go about doing it, so long as he slaughtered the Greeks for their offenses in the process. It was into that mess that he sent his best friend, thinking foolishly that Zeus would look at him as different from any other Greek soldier. No, Zeus looked at Patroclus the same way that Achilles did, as well as how they both looked at any other Greek soldier, as a means to Achilles' glory. We learn a little bit more about Briseis, Patroclus, and Achilles in this chapter, specifically their relationships with each other, as well as what each of them had hoped for the future. Briseis was captured at one of the Trojan allied cities that the Greeks plundered on their way to Troy. Achilles killed her husband in the process. As she grieved, Patroclus comes to her and promises that he will find a way to get her out of slavery. That is, he promises to make her Achilles' wife. She would live well and would be respected back in their homeland. Now, obviously, to us, that seems like a very shocking and tactless thing to say to somebody who just lost a spouse, especially in regards to the spouse's killer, the one who is currently enslaving them. But she speaks about this fondly, with affection, as if it was a great favor that Patroclus was offering to her. Why? Because life as a captured slave was nowhere close to pleasant. Remember, the one thing that Hector dreads above all else, even more than the deaths of his family, is Andromache, his wife, being taken away to be made a slave. Once you're in it, there's no reason to expect to be freed from it. Patroclus essentially promises that he's going to get her out of that life, that he's going to make sure that she's free someday. Given Patroclus' close association with Achilles, he probably could have gotten it done, too, so this really gives her hope. However, this plan takes for granted that both Achilles and Patroclus would live through the end of the Trojan War. So, Patroclus must have been banking on Achilles choosing the peaceful part of his prophecy, if he was thinking of that at all. Achilles had his own plans for the future, though. We are told now that he has a son that he fathered before coming to Troy, currently living on Skyros. Skyros? As an aside, Achilles is supposed to be very young in the Iliad, but it's this particular passage that makes me think that he's probably closer to 25 years old as opposed to 16, as some sources and scholars will say. Anyways, he wanted this son of his named Neoptolemus to go and live with his own father, Peleus, in order to console him after Achilles' impending death. Patroclus, he hoped, after the war, would go to Skyros and bring him there. This seems to suggest that Achilles always knew what his choice in his prophecy would be, at least to some extent, and yet, it is for sure Patroclus' death that causes him to choose that in the end. And with that death, all these possibilities for what could have been for Achilles or Patroclus or Briseis get whittled down to only one. Think back to Aristotle's quote that I mentioned several chapters before. But he who is unable to live in society, or who has no need because he is sufficient for himself, must be either a beast or a god. For most of the epic, Achilles had separated himself from his society, that is, the army, and had appeared godlike for doing so because of his self-sufficiency and his power without even lifting a finger. After Patroclus' death, when we saw him grieving, when he was overwhelmed for all his power, he seemed distinctly human to me. And it was during that time that all of his comrades were around him, and they mourned with him through the night. But now he refuses to break bread with his comrades, preferring instead to remain isolated in his grief and fury. Achilles appears to be indifferent to food, drink, and even glory in this book. He has a one-track mind, focused only on his grief for Patroclus' death and the revenge that he can get for it. He declares, "I have no taste for food. What I really crave is slaughter, and blood, and the choking groans of men." In this context, I think his indifference to food makes his godlikeness all the more apparent. Only the gods have no need of food or drink, and when they do eat, from desire rather than need, it's on nectar and ambrosia, the very things that Athena puts within Achilles' stomach to strengthen him without having him break his fast. This is a signal of his godlikeness to Homer's audience, but also to the Greek soldiers, because remember, they don't know about the nectar and ambrosia, but they do see that he's fasting. His abilities in battle are already just about superhuman, and they've all seen that, and his appearance is about that too, since his revelation in Book 18 and the dawning of his new divine armor that nobody can stand to look at. If you add to this the fact that nobody's seen him eat or sleep since Patroclus' death, an observer may justly start to wonder if he's human at all, which sets him up to win even more glory in the battle to come. After all, imagine if you were watching a race of some kind and one runner outstrips all the others by a huge margin, and then you were told that the victor hadn't slept or eaten in days. Would that increase or decrease their glory in your eyes? Achilles' fast before battle prepares him to win even more glory than would have been possible without it. Not by his design, but by Zeus's, provided that the battle goes well for him, which we will see. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, please like it and subscribe to the channel. And as always, if you learned something new, please comment below and let me know what it was. Thank you, and I will see you next week.